Finding Laura Bugs by Stanley Gordon West, Chapter 41, page 273. We all walked on eggshells for the next few days. I'd get home from school as quickly as I could to relieve my mother and spend time with Genevieve. My dad hung around the morning more than usual and drove Genevieve to the university for her hour with a psychologist. When he'd get back with her, he'd go off to work for a few hours. I know how hard this was for Gladys, fighting her own pain and nausea, but she was kind and very understanding with Genevieve. They were like two kids desperately hanging on to their swamp canoe in the midst of a windstorm, and I wanted to throw them a life jacket, but I didn't know how. I was proud of both of them, lucky to have two brave mothers who loved me. I tried to get back to normal at school and leave my worry at home. Before baseball practice Monday afternoon, Jim talked more than I'd ever heard him. The junior-senior prom that was coming week, he told me he always went fishing that weekend with his father and uncle and cousins up in Ely when the ice was out. I told him it was okay, that I had an uncle and cousin now too. He talked to Steve, perpetual bachelor of the gang, and Steve called and asked me to go. The afternoon of prom, I had two mothers doting over me. I'd traded formals with Marlene Hill, a junior Deb, who was skinny like me and about the same height. We figured two old formals on two new bodies might not be recognized. Hers was a beautiful orchid white strapless with small waist and ruffled skirt to the floor. I couldn't wait to wear it. I sat in front of the dresser mirror with Genevieve while Genevieve worked on my hair and my mother watched from the chair, enduring the way Amelia would and assuring us she was just fine. I was skinny like you when I was your age, Genevieve said. You were? I said with surprise. Yes, I didn't blossom until I was almost 20. After being around Genevieve, had a renewed hope that I wouldn't be flat-chested all my life. Despite her tall, slim figure, she was well endowed, and unless my father Peter sabotaged the mix, I could look forward to being a late bloomer. While she fussed with my hair, the doorbell rang. Gladys insisted on going to the door, and Genevieve and I kept at it. She said she was going to cut her hair to shoulder length, and I figured she wanted to cut away all remembrance of those horrific years as if she could cut the memory out of her brain. Sometimes I'd look at Genevieve with awe and be overcome with emotion. Life's greatest tragedy is to be unloved. The love my mother had demonstrated for me was beyond my comprehension, a kind of love I'd never heard of, that for much of that torturous time she'd make no attempt to free herself for fear of harming me. Gladys came staggering into my bedroom with an envelope and an open letter. Sandra, you're rich, she said out of breath. You're rich. She handed me the letter. I read it, sitting in front of the dresser mirror. I couldn't believe my eyes. The estate of Arnold Shapiro had been settled, and I received $33,000. There was a cashier's check in the envelope. The amount didn't hit me at first, and I opened my top drawer. In the hodgepodge of stuff, I spotted the marble, the blue and red marble I was afraid to let go in Wallman's study house so long ago. I had to smile. I shuffled through the clutter and found the picture of Mr. Shapiro and me playing Chinese checkers. He was looking into the camera, stubbornly defying Elsie and crazy world around him. I looked at the check and smiled. We crossed paths in 1933, and the check was for $33,000, a fortune. Who is that? Genevieve said, looking over my shoulder. An angel, I said. A tottering old angel. You're rich, Gladys said, still gasping. No, Mother, we're all rich. The prom was beautiful and a happy relief for the past weeks. We doubled with Cal and Gretchen, and those two were a mystery. I thought Cal was sweet for taking her. I figured that Cal going to jail had something to do with Gretchen, but I didn't know what. I'd never seen Gretchen looking so good and normal after all the years she walked around in those horrible clothes like a zombie. Someone told me her father was put in jail. I laughed at the thought of Mr. Letterman and Myron in the same cell. Steve was flying high and goofing around as usual, and he fast danced with me once when we were the only couple out on the floor. I knew he secretly loved Katie, and I still loved Scott, and Cal loved Lola, and I wondered if life was always this mixed up. I knew I was lucky to be alive, and I couldn't help thinking that this dance would have gone on just as it was without me if I had been buried in Myron Wilbershires' fruit cellar. We drove across Minneapolis to Hasty Tasty and along Lake Street. I could see myself clinging to life out on the running board, hearing my friends screaming, scared to death. That seemed a lifetime ago. I couldn't help but think about Mr. Shapiro and the people at the Sunset Home for the Aged and Friendless. I decided to start college in the fall with my friends, and maybe I could take nursing or something that would let me work with old people. I'd pay off the medical bills my parents had hanging over their heads, and I'd help Genevieve get started wherever she chose to settle. She was going to Iowa in the morning. A sadness overwhelmed me while we were eating cheeseburgers and fries and malts, and I didn't know where it came from. I'd found my mother, alive, and that brute was behind bars forever, I hoped, and I had a family in Iowa. I was filling up with sadness. Was it because my high school days were over? Was it because Scott didn't love me? Was it for my murdered father? As I drove home from Minneapolis, sitting next to good friend Steve and his friend faithful old Chevy, I realized this was the deal. That in the end, it doesn't matter a hoot who your real parents are, or if you ever know them, or how they treat you. The deal is that you've been given a gift of life, and you get to decide what you're going to do with it. In the end, that's the only thing that really matters, what we do with that gift. On May 31st, Memorial Day, Myron Wilbershire hung himself in his jail cell with his shirt. He was 52. He left a note. I can't live without my one true love. Even though I knew he was insane, a mentally ill man, I couldn't feel sorry for him, couldn't work up any compassion. Maybe in years to come, I'd be able to. My mother called Dr. Hartfield the first day of June, and my dad took her to the hospital. I wondered how much of it was Genevieve showing up in our lives so unexpectedly that had happened in the past weeks. It was just my dad and me at home again for a while. I caught the Selby Lake for downtown after school and surprised my mom in her hospital room. She shared a room with another woman, only a curtain separating them, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I found her dozing in the high hospital bed, looking exhausted. I woke her gently and said all the usual stuff. Then I took a breath and went ahead. Mom, I don't know how to say this, but I want to try. She pulled herself into a sitting position against the pillows. She had that expression on her face, she said when she told me I was adopted. You're the mother who raised me, who cared for me, who worried over me, who saw to it I did the right things, and that's the way it'll always be. No one else can ever do that for me. I'm grown up. Genevieve is a stranger to me. She's the woman who gave birth to me and took care of me that first year, but I don't even remember that. I think we'll be more like good friends than mother-daughter thing. I pray that she'll recover from her horrible experiences, but you're the only mom I'll ever have. I got it out just in time because we both started choking up. Oh, Sandra, she said, thank you. I think I've always dreaded this day would come, but you know, now that it has, it's not so bad. It can't change our 17 years together. I swallowed. What would Amelia do? I said. She managed a thin smile. What would Amelia do? She said. The next day, I ran into Sally after third period. Our yearbook, the Tahitian, had come out, and they were passing them around and signing them. I gave her mine to write in, and she gave me hers. I haven't seen you in weeks, she said. Where have you been? Finding Laura Bugs, I said, and I sailed up the hall in the stream of kids. I knew my remaining days at Central were few, and I intended to live each of them with gusto. I was going to visit Doris Flowers on the way home. I repeated it to myself so I would never forget. Mr. Shapiro, you're my hero. You helped me discover I was never a zero.